Welcome back to the Mark Moses Show, only right here on Sports Radio 95.9 The Fan. And right now here on the Club 52 Online to talk a little college football. Great friend of the show. His name is Matt Murschel at the Orlando Sentinel. We have much to discuss. Matt, how you doing today, man?
Pretty good. How you doing today, Mark?
Hey, I'm fine. And how about those Gators getting a new head football coach? The past week has been kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, it has been. You look at what, Florida made the decision early on, obviously, to part ways with Will Muschamp, letting him finish out the season. They go in a couple weeks after the season looking around. By all accounts, it looks like Jeremy Foley really kind of had a short list when it came down to who he thought would be best suited for this job. He never was really going to get a big-name hire. There wasn't going to be a Jim Harbaugh or something like that out there, Chip Kelly, those kind of names that were, just kind of thrown out in the rumor mill. I don't think that ever was going to be the case. I think he kind of zeroed in on Jim McElwain and decided he would be a guy who had obviously experience in the SEC with his days as offensive coordinator at Alabama, has worked, doing a great job. He's an offensive type guy, did a great job with Colorado State, getting that program from really, a 4-win season up to 10 wins this year. So I think he felt like he was the guy who was going to bring energy, renew the Florida program. And he better hope so, because obviously they've put out a lot of money for Jim McElwain. You talk about the buyout, which was anywhere what they think $7.5 million. You talk about what it's going to cost to get rid of Will Muschamp and his staff. You're looking at an output really that's going to be closer to the $15 to $20 million range when it's all said and done.
I get confused with the coaching staff, and I know nothing is certain right now, but so Durkin's doing the bowl game, but then is there a chance he doesn't come back as the defensive coordinator?
Obviously it depends on what Jim McElwain wants to do. Durkin's going to coach the bowl game. Normally when these kind of situations happen, the new coach says, I'm not going to coach the bowl game. Obviously I don't have, I'm going to be off doing recruiting or whatever, getting my staff, and then they let the previous staff kind of focus on the bowl game. So it's going to be Durkin who's going to coach. I don't know if he'll be back. I'm not sure. Normally it depends on, most of the time a new coach may keep a couple of, assistant coaches on staff, mainly guys who are strong in the recruiting realm, because they want to make sure they don't lose some of the recruits. And that's going to be very important for Florida, because really right now they've only got about 7 or 8 kids kind of, locked on their class. It's really low. I think they're ranked in the 80s nationally. Mm-hmm. And they need to do a great job of getting some new kids in here and beefing up that recruiting class. So I think he's going to do whatever it takes, but I'm sure he's going to bring in some of his own guys to get that staff to where he wants. And he may reach out to some other people as well that are working in other programs to join him on his staff.
I appreciate you answering that. We're here with Matt Murschel, Orlando Sentinel, because it's very confusing, because why are the Gators playing 2 days after New Year's Day? What am I missing here, Matt?
Well, I think, you look at the fact that the SEC, wanted to have a bigger role in establishing where their teams are going for the bowl season. They didn't want to just go back in the previous way where they would just kind of, seed them based on where they were on the rankings and then have those seeds go to, tie-ins to different bowl games. They wanted to be able to determine where their teams were going, where they were going to get some better matchups, create some new matchups that maybe weren't around, send them to different venues that they hadn't been in the previous past. Sometimes I think these bowls were getting tired of seeing the same teams, as the fan bases were, having the same teams coming to the same bowls, 2 or 3 years in a row, and I think what they tried to do was shake things up. Because of Florida's record, obviously they weren't going to get a high-profile bowl game, and, Birmingham, which is the home of the SEC, is where they're going to be at, and they get a chance to play an East Carolina team, which they will face next year.
Yeah, it's a good point. All right, let's talk about Florida State. They actually made the 4-team playoff. That was a crazy ACC title game, right? But that's what we expect from the Noles.
Yeah, I don't think if you thought it was going to be a blowout, then you haven't been watching Florida State football this year. Obviously they love to play close games. That was their 7th game, decided by under 7 points. You look at this, this team, they seem to they find a way to win, but they always make it close in the end. I think one of the things that Georgia Tech showed was that Florida's offensive or defensive line really struggles when it comes to those kind of matchups with, the triple option. They struggle with, giving up big plays. Even at the very end where they marched down the field reverting to their passing game, I thought they gave up big chunks of yards. That's not a good sign if you're going into this Rose Bowl against Oregon. Because, Oregon they don't run a triple option, but they run a lot of running, different looks of the running game. They're going to stunt a lot. They're going to use Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota is a much better quarterback than what Florida State saw in the ACC title game. So obviously he's got a strong arm. He's got the ability to make some plays as well. So I think it's a matchup problem in some ways for Florida State. I think they're going to have to figure out a way how to keep a lot more guys up front, to kind of stop the running game and force Oregon to become a passing attack. But that really hasn't happened for anyone much of the season.
When you look at the modern history, I'll say like the BCS type history, where we've had great teams like USC and we've had Alabama of late, I feel like this Florida State team, it doesn't get appreciated enough. Maybe because of the bad stuff it did off the field, but no one takes them seriously, and I think that it's one of the great runs in college football.
Yeah, when you think about it, that's the amazing thing. They've won 29 straight games. You talk about the idea, that this is really a dominant, this is what dynasties are really about, is winning games. But this season, for some reason, like you mentioned, whether it's the off-the-field problem, whether it's, everything with Jameis Winston, whatever's going on, they've become kind of the bad guy. They've been wearing the black hat of being the bad guy. And I think that now there are more fans who want to see them lose, because they want to kind of, see that happen. But amazingly, if they beat Oregon and get to the title game, I said this before, I think if Florida State wins the national title this year, I think Jimbo Fisher should be College Coach of the Year, because that's an amazing feat, going back to back and dealing with all the off the field issues that they've had to deal with Winston and with everything surrounding that. To get his team focused and to win these games the way they've been winning them, I think that's a pretty special feat.
Isn't the key to this team now number 4, Delvin Cook? Because I feel like he's gotten stronger every game, and he's really been the workhorse of the offense.
Yeah, I think Delvin Cook has stepped up and has really, shown the kind of potential that he was seeing. He was a highly recruited running back coming out of high school going into this class. And, as a freshman, it's always hard to see these guys step on the field and make instant impact. You expect them to struggle the first 4 or 5 games because they're getting used to the college game. They're getting used to bigger players, faster players, on the defensive side. So it didn't surprise me that it took Delvin Cook, up to maybe the last 4 or 5 weeks to really kind of get his feet on the ground and really kind of show the kind of, player that he really is. I think he's going to be the fastest guy that we've seen on Florida State's team. But that being said, Oregon has about 4 of those guys. You look at Marcus Mariota, you look at Royce Freeman, their freshman running back. They've got as much talent and athleticism as any team across the country.
What about that defense for the Noles? You were just talking the offense. Is the defense for the Noles the key? They got to play 60 minutes, and there can't be any mistakes.
Yeah, that's going to be the key. They've got to contain the running game. The defense has been banged up. Had some guys injured. Now you've got a month to kind of get everyone fresh and healthy. You give a month for these coaches to prepare for this game. Jimbo Fisher is one of the best when it comes to that. He'll put together a game plan that'll take care of Oregon. But, again, one of the nice things about being in these big games is a lot of these players have been through the national championship process last year. So they had to deal with the media. They had to deal with the obligations that come with that. They have to deal with, press conferences and dealing with the media and being on TV all the time. So that should help them a little bit. I think a lot of these guys know what is going to be needed, what kind of focus they need to have, when they need to kind of return focus, get into those meetings, and start warring at. So I give the edge to Florida State that way, at least especially defensively. But again, like I said, they're going to face an offense they've never faced before. Georgia Tech, maybe a little bit similar. Clemson, obviously, but I don't think they've ever faced a team like Oregon who has that kind of speed, that sort of athleticism. So I think they're going to have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take a lot of their secondary to kind of come up and make the plays and not let Oregon come up with a big, one of those home run type plays that they seem to thrive on during the season.
I agree with you. Great insight. We're here with Matt Murschel, Orlando Sentinel. I know you're going to be covering the other game, which is going to be a slobber knocker there at the Superdome in New Orleans. Ohio State, Bama. Is this just a dream matchup for college football fans?
Yeah, it is. I wrote about this weekend that, if you're the selection committee and they said, we didn't look at matchups when we were putting this together, I find that hard to believe because you have an opportunity to put Nick Saban and Urban Meyer back on the same football field for a game with programs of Alabama and Ohio State. That's a dream matchup, especially considering it's at the Sugar Bowl, which is just right around the corner from Alabama. You know that, Ohio State travels well. That place will be full. Those two coaches have 6 national championships between them. You talk about, their days from the SEC. Obviously, they both know each other really well from there. And so I think that's the perfect matchup. And both these two teams, by the way, are playing some of the best football right now. Alabama has not looked – they've looked as impressive as I've seen them look in many years now with that offense, with Blake Sims stepping up. The defense is making plays as well. And Ohio State, with being on their third quarterback, Cardell Jones in that Big Ten game stepped up and looked like a first stringer and really looked like he didn't miss a beat, and they put up 59 points. And their defense stepped up to shut down Wisconsin and give them the big goose egg. So I think this is one of those matchups. Of the two games, as much as no offense to Florida State, of the two games, this is the game I'm really looking forward to matchup-wise.
It's interesting, and I talked about this yesterday on my show, is I think this is a big moment for the Big Ten Conference. It's been a couple years since they've been in this spotlight, and I know everyone in the SEC country, because we live here, they chant SEC, SEC. I think this is a big moment for the Big Ten. What about you, Matt?
Oh, I think so, too, because the Big Ten wants to show that it deserves to be considered one of the top 2 or 3 conferences in college football. About a month ago, you would have thought the Big Ten had no chance of getting into the playoff. Ohio State, as impressive as they looked, you looked at the Big Ten as a whole, their conference schedule wasn't that strong. Some of the teams weren't as strong. Now they get into the game. They're facing off against the SEC, the power, it seems, especially the last decade of college football. If they were to beat Alabama and have a big win there and move on to the national championship, it would validate the Big Ten. It would probably validate Urban Meyer's move to the Ohio State as well because, again, getting that program back from the days of, at the end when Jim Tressel was forced out during all the NCAA stuff, and then, to get Urban Meyer in there and to get them kind of back the way they are, this will really validate him as well. I would think that if he gets to the national championship and wins the national championship with a third-string quarterback, that would have to be, in my estimation, the best coaching job Urban Meyer has ever done. Let's
end with this. What's the future of the Big 12 now since they were denied a chance to play for the playoff?
Well, I think, everyone, especially in this area, I know a lot of UCF fans want to see the Big 12 expand, expect them to see them expand and reach out and bring in UCF. But I don't see that happening. And I've been trying to calm everyone down because I think what the Big 12 wants to do now is they're going to look back and say, okay, now we know what's required, what we know is needed for us to get there. So they've already established the idea that they're going to the NCAA to try to get this waiver so that they can eliminate the need to have 12 teams for a championship game. If they get that waiver, and the ACC is along with them as well, so if they get that waiver, then what the Big 12 will do is they'll just establish a championship game, despite the fact they only got 10 teams. If they don't get that waiver, I think you'll see them maybe look around, maybe they may decide to expand, but I think they'll push more towards trying to get the playoff expanded. Maybe get it moved from 4 to 6 or 8 teams, because I think they feel like, listen, and they'll go and say this to all these other conference commissioners, listen, if we expand, it's going to shake up college football one more time because we're going to take a couple teams, and that's going to have a trickle-down effect to another conference, and that's going to trickle down to another conference, and it's really going to be hard for them. And I think now they're looking around saying there really aren't any schools that we can add that bring value to the Big 12, especially financially, that they can really rewrite their television deal.
That's a good point. The thing with UCF is it's like they won their conference and now they're not relevant anymore. At least last year they went to Fiesta Bowl. That's what's a little like if I'm UCF, I better make sure I have a brighter future, right, Matt?
Well, I mean, and again, not to be flippant, but if you're UCF, then beat UConn. If UCF beats UConn and beats Penn State in the first game of the season, they're right there with Boise State as being mentioned as a possible, to go to the Access Bowl. So I think again, when it comes to these, I think when you look at what UCF has gained from going to the American, it's way better than most people assume because they're getting national exposure. They're on Thursday night. They're on Friday night. They're the only game in town. I mean, you're getting that kind of exposure, and you're getting that money and that payoff. So I think, eventually maybe down the road, maybe who knows, they could go to a bigger conference. But I think for right now, they just need to enjoy the success they're having and keep moving forward with it.
That's a good point. Matt Murschel, Orlando Sentinel. Great stuff, Matt, and I hope I can get you on again in the next couple of weeks.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. We'll talk to you later.